My name is Wren Calloway, and I need you to sit with a question before I tell you what my sister did to me on a Tuesday afternoon in September. What would you do if the person you trusted most in the world handed you her children at an airport gate, said almost nothing, and got on a plane without you? Would you assume the worst? Because I did. And I was wrong about almost everything, in ways that still make my chest tight when I think about them. Quick bit about me. I'm 41, a high school guidance counselor in Savannah, Georgia, married to my husband Theo for 17 years, raising our 16-year-old son Asher. My little sister Marisol is 5 years younger than me, and when we were kids, after our father walked out, I was the one who became the substitute parent, packing her lunches, signing her permission slips, showing up to parent-teacher conferences at 14 years old because nobody else would. That history matters, because it's exactly why my first instinct that day at the airport wasn't fear for my sister. It was furious. Keep that in mind, because it colors everything that happened next. I got to the terminal a little after 3, expecting a routine handoff, the kind Marisol and I did every few months, dropping her twins Nova and Silas off with me for a weekend while she worked a stretch of overtime at the port. That was the arrangement. It had been the arrangement for 2 years, ever since she and Grant separated and she started picking up extra shifts to cover the mortgage on her own. I remember thinking, walking through the sliding doors, that I needed to grab groceries after this, that Asher had a game Saturday, ordinary thoughts, the kind you have right before your whole afternoon gets knocked sideways. Instead, I found her standing near the security checkpoint with both kids, and she looked wrong. Her hair, which she chopped short a few months earlier without explanation, was pulled back so tight it looked painful. She was wearing a jacket in 90-degree heat, sleeves pulled down over her wrists, which struck me as odd even in the chaos of the moment, though I didn't understand why until much later. Her eyes kept moving to the doors behind her, over and over, like she was counting something only she could see. "Wren," she said, and grabbed my arm before I'd even said hello. "I need you to take them. Right now." "Take them where?" "Mari, what's going on?" She pressed a folder into my hands, sealed, heavier than it looked. "Don't open this here. Take the kids home. I'll call you." "Call me from where?" My voice was already climbing. Nova, 8 years old and never quiet for long, looked between us with wide eyes. Silas, her twin, had gone very still in the way he does when something's wrong, holding his mother's hand tighter. "I have to go," Marisol said. "I have a flight." "A flight to where?" She hesitated, just long enough that I knew whatever she said next wasn't going to be the whole truth. "Turks and Caicos." "I'll explain everything, I promise, I can't right now, there isn't time." "You cannot be serious." I felt something old and familiar rising in my chest, the same feeling I used to get at 15 when she'd disappear for hours without telling anyone where she'd gone. "You're leaving your kids at an airport to fly to the Caribbean and you're not going to tell me why?" "Please, Wren." Her voice cracked, just slightly, the first real crack in her composure since I'd walked up. "Please just trust me. Just this once." "Trust you?" "Mari, you haven't told me anything." "Not one thing. You show up looking like you haven't slept in a week, dressed for winter in the middle of summer, and you want me to just, take your kids and not ask questions?" "I know how this looks." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing it looks like you're running from something, and instead of telling me what it is, you're handing me your children and getting on a plane." She flinched at that, actually flinched, like I'd hit her, and for one brief second something in her face cracked open, something raw and terrified that didn't match the woman I thought I knew. Then it closed again, fast, like a door pulled shut. "Just this once." As if I hadn't spent half my childhood trusting her, covering for her, cleaning up whatever mess she'd left behind, and getting nothing but more mess in return. I felt that resentment rise up hot and fast, the resentment I'd never once said out loud to her, not in 30 years. Mom, are you okay? Nova asked, tugging at Marisol's jacket. Marisol crouched down, cupped both their faces in her hands, and said something I couldn't quite hear, low, urgent, meant only for them. Silas nodded. Nova's chin trembled, but she nodded too. Then Marisol stood, kissed each of them on the head, and looked at me with an expression I didn't understand yet, something that looked almost like relief mixed with terror. "Take care of them," she said. "Please. Don't call Grant. Whatever happens, don't call Grant." Before I could ask why on earth I wouldn't call her own husband, the father of her children, she was walking toward her gate, and security was already checking her boarding pass, and I was standing there holding a sealed folder and two frightened 8-year-olds while my sister disappeared through a door I couldn't follow her through. If you've ever had someone you love ask you to trust them completely, with absolutely no explanation, while everything in you is screaming that something is deeply wrong, I want you to stay with me through this one, because it only gets more intense from here. This channel tells stories exactly like mine, real families, real secrets, real reasons hiding underneath the ones that look obvious at first. We post a brand new story every single day here on Com Stories Drama, so go ahead and hit subscribe right now, and turn on that notification bell, because you are not going to want to miss where this goes. I drove the twins home in near silence. Nova talked the whole way she does when she's scared, filling every quiet second with chatter about school and a hamster and whether her mom would bring back seashells. Silas said almost nothing at all, just stared out the window, his hands folded tight in his lap like he was holding something he wasn't sure he was allowed to say. I caught him in the rearview mirror twice, watching me, and both times he looked away fast when I noticed. Theo met us at the door, took one look at my face, and didn't ask a single question in front of the kids. He got them settled with grilled cheese and a movie in the living room while I stood in the kitchen trying to remember how to breathe normally. I called Marisol's phone 4 times before her plane would have even landed. Straight to voicemail every time. I texted her twice, 3 times, my thumbs shaking a little on the screen. "Please just tell me you're okay. Please just tell me something." Nothing came back. I didn't open the folder until they were both asleep in Asher's old bunk beds, the house finally quiet, Theo standing in the kitchen doorway watching me with the particular patience of a man who's learned not to ask too many questions too fast, at least not until I'm ready to answer them. "You gonna open that?" he said finally, nodding at the folder sitting unopened on the counter between us. "I don't know if I want to know what's in it." "You already know you're going to open it, Wren." He was right, of course. He usually is, about the things that matter. Inside the folder was cash, more than I expected, several $1,000s in careful stacks. A photocopy of Marisol's passport. And a single folded page in her handwriting, the same handwriting from every birthday card she'd ever sent me, shaky in a way I'd never seen from her before. "Wren. I need you to trust me even though I know I haven't given you a reason to in a long time. Don't call Grant. Don't tell him where the kids are, don't tell him I contacted you, don't tell him anything. I'll explain everything soon, I promise. Just please keep them safe until I can." I read it 3 times, sitting on the edge of my son's old bed with my sister's children asleep down the hall, and I felt the anger I'd been carrying since the airport start to curdle into something worse. Fear. Because in 17 years of knowing her husband, my sister had never once, not a single time, told me not to trust him. Grant had always been the steady one, the reasonable one, the one who called on my birthday and remembered Asher's game schedule better than some of my own friends did. If Marisol was warning me away from him now, whatever had happened in the weeks before that airport, it was worse than anything I'd let myself imagine standing at that gate. I sat there a long time after Theo finally went to bed, the folder open in my lap, my sister's shaky handwriting staring back at me under the lamplight, and for the first time since I was 14 years old, I understood that I had absolutely no idea what my little sister had actually been carrying, all this time, right in front of me. Grant showed up at my house 2 days later, and I want to tell you exactly how it happened, because looking back, every single detail of that visit mattered more than I understood at the time. He didn't call first. He just appeared on my porch a little after 6, still in his work clothes, a logistics badge clipped to his belt, looking like a man who'd had a long day and simply wanted to see his kids. That was the version of Grant I'd known for 17 years. Steady. Reasonable. The kind of guy who remembered to ask about your mother. Wren. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I heard the twins are staying with you for a bit. Who told you that? Nova called me last night. From your house phone. He said it lightly, but I felt something cold move through me, because I hadn't known that call happened, and I hadn't given her permission to make it. She's worried about her mom. So am I, honestly. I don't know where Marisol is, Grant. Neither do I. He rubbed the back of his neck, and it was such a small, human gesture, exactly the kind of thing an innocent, worried husband would do, that for a moment I almost believed him completely. She's not answering my calls either. I figured maybe she'd told you something. Where she went, why she left like that. I thought about the note in my kitchen drawer. Don't call Grant. Whatever happens, don't call Grant. She didn't tell me anything, I said, which was mostly true. Can I see the kids? Just for a few minutes. Every instinct in me said no, but I didn't have a reason yet, not one I could put into words, and Grant was still, on paper, their father, with every legal right to see them. I let him in. I stood in the doorway of the living room the entire time, watching him crouch down in front of Nova, watching him ask her, in a voice that sounded almost too casual, whether her mom had said anything before she left, anything at all, any names, any places. Nova, who tells you everything she's thinking within about 4 seconds of thinking it, started rattling off details, the airport, the folder, Aunt Wren, and I watched Grant's face very carefully while she talked. He nodded along, warm, patient. But his eyes had gone somewhere else entirely, calculating something, and I recognized that look, because I'd worn it myself 100 times in faculty meetings, the look of someone doing math they don't want anyone to notice they're doing. Silas said nothing the whole visit. He sat on the far end of the couch, knees pulled up, watching his father with an expression I couldn't quite read. When Grant reached over to ruffle his hair goodbye, Silas flinched, just slightly, a small full-body tightening that lasted less than a second, and I don't think anyone else in that room caught it. I did. After Grant left, I sat down next to Silas on the couch. You okay, bud? He shrugged, eyes on the television that wasn't even turned on. You know you can tell me anything, right? Whatever it is. Mom said it was a game, he said quietly, so quietly I almost missed it. What game? He looked at me then, really looked at me, 8 years old and carrying something in his face that no 8-year-old should have to carry. The quiet game. She said if I ever heard grown-up stuff, I wasn't supposed to repeat it. That it was important I kept it a secret, even from you. My stomach dropped. Silas, I promise you, whatever it is, you're not in trouble, and neither is your mom. But I need you to tell me. It might help me find her. He was quiet for a long moment, picking at a loose thread on the couch cushion. Then, in a small, careful voice, he told me about a night 3 weeks earlier. He'd gotten up for water and heard his parents in the kitchen, his father's voice low and hard in a way he'd never heard before. His father had said something about a shipment, a date, and then he'd said, if you take my kids and go to the police, you will regret it for the rest of your life, however long that ends up being. I felt the floor tilt underneath me. Did your mom say anything back? She was crying. She told him she just wanted out. That's all she wanted. He looked up at me. Am I in trouble? No. No, sweetheart, you did exactly the right thing telling me. I pulled him into a hug, my mind racing in 6 directions at once, trying to fit this new, horrifying piece into whatever picture I was building. That night, after both kids were finally asleep, I went back through the folder Marisol had given me, more carefully this time. Underneath the cash and the passport copy, tucked into a side pocket I hadn't noticed before, was a business card. Federal Investigator. Paige Renfro. Department of Homeland Security, Cargo Fraud Division. If you're the kind of person who likes piecing a mystery together before the story tells you the answer, I want to know in the comments what you think is really going on here, because so many of you have been messaging me guesses since part 1, and some of you are closer than you realize. Make sure you're subscribed to Calm Stories Drama. We post a brand new story every single day, and if you haven't already, hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next, because it is about to get a lot more serious. I called the number on the card the next morning before school drop-off, my hands shaking so badly I dialed wrong twice. Detective Renfro answered on the second ring. When I told her my name, there was a pause on the line, long enough that I knew, before she said a single word, that she already knew exactly who I was. Wren Calloway, she said. Marisol's sister. Yes. I need to know what's going on. Please. I have her kids and I don't know where she is, and her husband showed up at my house asking questions I don't think he should be asking. Where are you right now? At home. Stay there. Keep the doors locked. I'm sending someone to you within the hour, and I'll explain everything I'm legally able to explain when I get there myself, this afternoon. Her voice had shifted, gone careful and controlled in a way that scared me more than anything Grant had said on my porch. Mrs. Calloway, I need you to trust me on something important. Do not contact Grant Ashford again. Do not let him near those children unsupervised. Can you do that? Why? What has he done? I'll explain everything I can this afternoon. I promise you that. Right now I need you to focus on keeping those kids safe. She hung up before I could ask another question, and I stood in my kitchen holding a phone that had gone silent, more frightened than I had been since the moment Marisol walked away from that gate. Renfro arrived a little after 2, a tall woman in a plain gray blazer, calm in a way that felt practiced, the calm of someone who has delivered difficult news more times than she can count. She sat at my kitchen table and laid out, carefully, only what she said she was legally permitted to share. Grant Ashford was under active federal investigation for cargo fraud running through the port of Jacksonville, falsified shipping manifests used to move goods that were never declared, a scheme that had likely been running for over 2 years. Marisol, through her job at the same port, had unknowingly processed some of the falsified paperwork herself, months before she understood what she was looking at. When did she figure it out? I asked. About 4 months ago, based on what she told us. She came to us voluntarily 2 months later, once she understood the scope of what he was involved in, and once she realized the danger wasn't just financial. The danger to the kids. Renfro's expression softened, just slightly. She's been working with us since then, gathering what she could without raising suspicion, trying to build enough of a case that we could move on Grant without putting herself or the children directly in his path first. 3 weeks ago, we believe he became aware that she'd spoken to federal investigators. That's when things became urgent. I thought of Silas's small voice on the couch. If you take my kids and go to the police, you will regret it for the rest of your life. She left them with me because she thought Grant might come after them, I said slowly, the pieces finally sliding into place. And she left the country because she thought if she disappeared completely, he'd focus on finding her, not them. That's our understanding, yes. Why didn't she just tell me any of this? Renfro looked at me for a long moment before she answered. Because the less you knew, the safer you and those children were, if he ever came asking. She was trying to protect all 3 of you, Mrs. Calloway, in the only way she believed she could. I sat there at my own kitchen table, the folder from the airport sitting between us, and felt every ounce of anger I'd been carrying toward my sister for 2 days crack straight down the middle. Where is she right now? Somewhere safe. That's genuinely all I can tell you at this stage. Renfro's phone buzzed on the table, and whatever she read on the screen made her sit up straighter, her expression sharpening into something urgent. Mrs. Calloway, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Has Grant Ashford been to this house since the twins arrived? Yesterday. He left maybe an hour before you called. Did he go anywhere in the house unsupervised? A bathroom, another room, anything? I thought back, and my stomach turned over as I remembered him excusing himself for 2, maybe 3 minutes, saying he needed to use the restroom down the hall, the hallway that led directly past Asher's old room, where the twins were sleeping, where the folder had been sitting, until I moved it, on top of the dresser. Yes, I said quietly. He did. Renfro was already standing, already reaching for her phone, her calm composure cracking for the first time since she'd walked through my door. I need you to get the children somewhere else tonight, she said. Right now. Because if he knows what I think he knows, he's not going to wait very long to come back. What do you think he knows? She hesitated, and in that hesitation I understood she was deciding how much to tell a civilian, how much I actually needed to hear to keep 2 8-year-olds alive through the next 12 hours. There's a shipment moving through the port tonight that we believe is connected to the fraud case. If Marisol left anything behind, notes, documents, anything that could tie him to it, and he suspects it might be in this house. He was looking for something. My voice came out flatter than I expected, the fear underneath it too large to fit into normal words. That's why he came here. Not to see the kids. To search my house. I can't confirm that. But I'm not willing to take the risk that I'm wrong. I called Theo at the job site and told him to come home immediately, no questions, and while I waited for him I packed a bag for each of the twins with hands that wouldn't quite stop shaking. Nova asked a dozen questions I didn't have good answers for. Silas didn't ask anything at all. He just watched me pack, his small face unreadable, like he'd already understood, somewhere in that quiet, careful mind of his, that the danger his father represented was bigger than a secret game, bigger than anything an 8-year-old should have had to carry alone for 3 weeks. Renfro arranged for us to stay that night at a safe location an hour outside the city, a modest house owned by the agency, plain and unremarkable from the outside, the kind of place nobody would think twice about driving past. Theo followed behind us the whole way, his truck's headlights steady in my rearview mirror, and I found myself checking those mirrors more than the road ahead, watching for any car that stayed with us too long, any set of lights that felt like they were following rather than simply traveling the same direction. Nothing followed us. Not that night. But the fear didn't leave, not even after we'd gotten the twins settled into an unfamiliar bedroom with unfamiliar sheets, not even after Theo checked every lock on every door twice. I sat up long after everyone else had finally fallen asleep, my sister's note from the airport folder still in my hand, worn soft now from how many times I'd unfolded and refolded over the last 2 days. Don't call Grant. Whatever happens, don't call Grant. She hadn't been being cryptic. She hadn't been being cruel, or careless, or any of the things I'd silently accused her of standing at that airport gate. She had been trying, in the only way available to her, to keep her children out of the reach of a man who apparently would stop at almost nothing to protect whatever he was hiding. And somewhere, in a country I'd never been to, my little sister was out there completely alone, carrying all of it by herself, the way she'd apparently been carrying it for months, while I'd spent 2 days angry at her for not explaining fast enough. My phone buzzed on the nightstand a little after 1 in the morning. An unknown number, no name attached. I almost didn't answer it. Something made me pick it up anyway. Wren. The voice on the other end was quiet, exhausted, and unmistakably, impossibly, my sister's. Wren, are the kids safe? Please tell me the kids are safe. They're safe, I said, my voice cracking on the second word. Mari, where are you? What is going on? She let out a breath I could hear even through the static of an international call, something between a sob and relief. I'm in Providentials. Staying with Odalise. You remember Odalise, from high school. I'm so sorry, Wren. I am so sorry I couldn't tell you any of this before I got on that plane. Renfro told me some of it. Not all of it. I need to hear it from you. So she told me. All of it, finally, the whole story pouring out of her in a rush like something that had been dammed up for months finally breaking loose. It started almost a year earlier, she said, small things she'd brushed off at the time. Grant stayed late at the port for reasons that didn't quite add up. Phone calls he took in the garage with the door shut. Cash appearing in places it shouldn't have been, more than his logistics broker salary could explain. She'd asked him about it once, early on, and he'd gotten so cold, so controlling in his answer, that she'd learned quickly not to ask again. Then 4 months ago, filling in for a coworker on medical leave, she'd processed a batch of shipping manifests that didn't match the cargo she could see logged on the dock cameras. Numbers that didn't add up. Declared weights that made no physical sense. She hadn't thought much of it at first, assumed it was a clerical error, until she recognized Grant's authorization code on 3 of the documents. I told myself it was nothing for weeks, she said. I didn't want it to be what it looked like. He's the father of my children, Wren. I didn't want to believe he'd do something like that. When did you know for sure? When I finally asked him directly, he didn't deny it. He just told me it wasn't my business, that I needed to forget what I'd seen, that things would be fine as long as I kept my mouth shut and did my job. Her voice hardened. That's when I understood who I'd actually married. She'd gone to Renfro's office 2 months later, terrified, certain she was making a mistake, certain it would blow up her entire life. And it had, in a way. But not the way she'd feared. I started gathering things, she said. Copies of manifests. Notes on dates, shipments, conversations I overheard. I gave them to the investigators as I found them, small pieces at a time, trying not to raise suspicion at home. I thought I had more time. I thought I could get enough evidence built before he ever noticed. But he noticed. 3 weeks ago. I don't know exactly how, maybe someone at the port, maybe he just got paranoid and started watching me more closely. But he came home one night and he wasn't the man I married anymore. He told me if I went to the police, if I tried to take the kids and leave, I would regret it for the rest of my life, however long that turned out to be. Her voice shook. Wren, he meant it. I have never in my life heard someone mean something the way he meant that. Silas heard that conversation, I told her quietly. He's been carrying it for 3 weeks, thinking it was some kind of secret game. There was a long pause on the line, and when Marisol spoke again, her voice had broken completely. I told him it was a game because I didn't know how else to explain to an 8-year-old why he couldn't tell anyone what he'd heard, without terrifying him more than he already was. I am so sorry. I am so sorry for all of it, Wren, the airport, the silence, everything. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I disappeared completely, if Grant thought I was the only thing worth chasing, he'd leave the kids alone. I thought if I told you the truth, it would put you and Theo and Asher in danger too, just for knowing it. I sat in that unfamiliar bedroom, my sister's shaking voice in my ear, and I finally said the thing I'd never once said to her in 30 years. I was angry at you at that airport. Not scared for you. Angry. Because that's what I always am with you, Mari, it's what I've always been, since we were kids, since Dad left and I had to become someone I wasn't ready to be. I look at you disappearing and some old, ugly part of me just assumes you're being irresponsible again, instead of asking whether something is actually wrong. You had every right to be angry. No. I didn't. Not this time. And maybe not most of the other times either. I think I've been punishing you for 30 years for something that was never actually your fault, and I am so sorry it took almost losing you, and almost losing those kids, for me to say that out loud. Silence stretched on the line, thick with everything neither of us had said in 3 decades, and then Marisol let out a small, wet laugh. We can have this conversation properly when I'm not hiding in a stranger's guest bedroom on an island, if that's all right with you. Deal. Come home safe first. I want to pause the story here for a second, because I think a lot of you have been waiting for this moment since part 1, that gut punch realization that the person you judged the fastest was actually protecting you the whole time. If you've ever misjudged someone you love, assumed the worst before asking a single question, I hope this part of the story is landing the way it's meant to. Subscribe to Calm Stories Drama if you haven't already. We release a brand new story every single day, and if this one has you feeling something right now, let me know in the comments, because the ending is coming, and it is worth staying for. Renfro's team moved on Grant 2 nights later. I only learned the details afterward, pieced together from what Renfro was eventually able to share once the case became public record. Agents intercepted the shipment at the port of Jacksonville that Renfro had warned me about, seizing cargo that had been falsely declared for over 2 years, worth an estimated $4 million in unpaid duties and laundered goods. Grant was arrested at the port itself, attempting to oversee the shipment's departure personally, apparently unwilling to trust the operation to anyone else once he suspected the walls were closing in. He never made it back to my house that night. Whatever he'd been searching for during his visit, whatever he suspected Marisol might have hidden there, he ran out of time before he ever got the chance to look for it a second time. Renfro told me later that agents did eventually search my house, with my permission, and found nothing, no documents, no evidence, because Marisol had been careful enough, frightened enough, to never let a single physical trace of what she knew come anywhere near her children or her sister. Everything she'd gathered had gone directly and only to federal investigators, copies made, originals returned, nothing left behind that could put us in danger. I asked Renfro once, in the weeks afterward, whether Marisol had ever been in danger of facing charges herself for having processed those falsified documents even briefly before she understood what they were. Renfro told me no, that Marisol's voluntary cooperation, the moment she came forward rather than staying silent, had protected her completely, legally and otherwise. It was, Renfro said, one of the more straightforward cooperation cases she'd worked in years, because Marisol had never once tried to protect herself at the expense of the investigation. She could have stayed quiet, Renfro told me. A lot of people in her position do. It's easier, in the short term, to look away. She's not really built that way, I said. Even when it would have been safer for her. Marisol came home 11 days after she left, stepping off a flight into the same terminal where she disappeared, thinner, exhausted, but steady in a way I hadn't seen in her in years, maybe ever. The twins ran to her the second they saw her, Nova talking so fast I couldn't make out half of what she was saying, Silas wrapping both arms around her waist and simply not letting go for a long, long time. I watched my sister crouch down and hold her children in the middle of a crowded terminal, and I thought about every assumption I'd made about her over the last 2 weeks, every version of the story I'd built in my head where she was the villain, running from her responsibilities, abandoning the people who needed her. I had been wrong about almost everything. And I had never in my life been more relieved to be wrong. The weeks that followed weren't simple. Grant's trial is still ongoing as I'm telling you this, federal fraud cases move slowly, and Marisol has had to testify twice already, each time reliving parts of the last year she'd rather forget. The twins started seeing a family therapist, someone who specializes in kids who've lived through this kind of fear, and slowly, carefully, Silas started talking again, not just about that overheard conversation, but about everything, the fear he'd been carrying silently for months before any of us understood how much he was holding. Marisol and I talk almost every day now, really talk, the way we never did before, not even as kids. She told me once, sitting in my kitchen a few weeks after she came home, that the hardest part of the whole thing wasn't Grant, or the fear, or even the danger. It was the loneliness of carrying a secret she couldn't share with the one person who'd spent her whole life taking care of her. "I didn't want you to have to take care of me one more time," she said. "I wanted, just once, to handle something myself, without you swooping in to fix it. And instead you handled the biggest crisis of your life completely alone, and almost got yourself killed doing it." She laughed, a little sadly. "Yeah. In hindsight, maybe not my best plan. We're working on it, the two of us, learning what it actually looks like to be sisters instead of guardians and dependent, 30 years later than we probably should have started. It's not perfect. Some old habits are hard to unlearn. But for the first time in my adult life, I feel like I actually know my sister, not the version of her I built out of old resentments and unexamined assumptions, but the real one, the one who got on a plane alone to protect her children, and trusted me with the most important thing she had, even when she couldn't yet explain why. If there's one thing I hope you take from our story, it's this. The people we judge the fastest are sometimes the ones fighting the hardest battles, quietly, without asking for credit or understanding. Before you decide someone has abandoned you, ask yourself if maybe, just maybe, they're trying to protect you instead. Thank you so much for staying with me through this whole story. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. We share a brand new true-to-life drama every single day here on Calm Stories Drama, and these stories mean so much more when I know they're reaching people who need them. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have trusted your sister the way I eventually learned to trust mine? And if you want another story about family, secrets, and the truth finally coming to light, there's another one waiting for you right now, and I promise, it won't disappoint. I'll see you in the next one.